The Star's Gift. Chapter 1, The Mysterious Star. The wind whispered through the evergreen trees, shaking off the last remnants of autumn's fading colors. Snow had begun to blanket the village of Wintermere, turning it into a world of shimmering white beneath a frosty sky. Christmas was just days away, and the villagers had already begun to decorate their homes with wreaths, garlands, and strings of twinkling lights. The streets were filled with the familiar sights of holiday cheer, but for one young girl, there was a sense of something more, something magical in the air. Eliza sat on the windowsill of her grandfather's house, staring out into the evening sky. The light from the fire crackled warmly behind her, but she barely noticed. She was lost in thought, wondering if this Christmas would be different. Her grandfather often spoke of Christmases long ago, of times when the village had celebrated in grand fashion, but that was before Eliza was born. Now, the festivities seemed to be fading into routine. People had grown busy and weary, and the true magic of the season was slipping away. It was on this quiet evening, just as dusk began to settle over the mountains, that Eliza saw it, a star, brighter than any she had ever seen before, shining in the sky above the forest. Its glow was steady and unwavering, cutting through the chill of the night like a beacon. Eliza's heart quickened as she gazed at it, mesmerized by its brilliance. She felt as if it were calling to her. "Grandfather!" she called out, her voice filled with excitement. She turned from the window and ran to where he sat by the hearth. He was a tall man with a weathered face, his hair thin and silvered with age, but his eyes still held the sparkle of youth. His hands, though rough and worn, had a tenderness about them that made Eliza feel safe in his presence. "What is it, child?" he asked, looking up with a knowing smile. "Look." Eliza pointed toward the window. "Do you see that star?" Her grandfather's expression softened, a faraway look coming into his eyes. He rose from his chair and walked over to the window, peering out at the distant sky. "That is no ordinary star," he said quietly. "It is the Star of the North." Eliza frowned. "The Star of the North? I've never heard of it." Her grandfather smiled, a hint of mystery in his eyes. He reached for the old leather-bound book that rested on the table beside him and opened it to a well-worn page. The book was filled with stories of Wintermere's past, tales of ancient legends and forgotten customs. "This star," he began, "appears only once every 100 years, just before Christmas. It is said to be a gift from the heavens, a sign of hope and renewal. Long ago, the people of Wintermere would look to the star for guidance, believing that it would lead them to a gift far greater than any they could imagine." Eliza's eyes widened. "A gift? What kind of gift?" Her grandfather's gaze grew distant, and he leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on the armrest. "That, my dear, is the mystery. The star's gift is not something that can be seen with the eyes alone. It is something that must be felt deep in your heart." He paused, as if gathering his thoughts. "I've heard many tales in my time, but the ones about the Star of the North are always the most wondrous. Some say it brings peace to the troubled, others claim it heals the broken, and a few believe it can even restore what has been lost. But no one really knows. The star chooses its bearer, and its gift is given only to those who are truly worthy." Eliza stood there, staring out at the brilliant star, her mind racing with possibilities. She had always loved stories, but this one felt different. It felt real, like it held the answer to something important, something she had been searching for her whole life. Her grandfather placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, bringing her back to the present. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" he asked softly. Eliza nodded, not looking away from the star. "Do you think the gift will come to Wintermere again this year?" Her grandfather's smile grew tender. "Perhaps. It is not for us to know, but if you are meant to find the gift, you will. The star will guide you." Just then, there was a knock at the door. Eliza turned to see a tall figure standing in the doorway, a silhouette framed by the falling snow. It was the village blacksmith, a strong man named Lucas, known for his quiet demeanor and kind heart. "Good evening, Master Wren," Lucas said, nodding respectfully to Eliza's grandfather. "I've brought some firewood for you, as promised." Her grandfather smiled warmly at Lucas. "Thank you, Lucas. Come in, come in. It's a bitter night outside." As Lucas stepped inside, he glanced at Eliza, his expression thoughtful. "I saw the star tonight," he said. "It's unlike any other I've ever seen. Have you heard the old stories, Miss Eliza?" Eliza nodded eagerly, her eyes alight with curiosity. "Yes, my grandfather just told me about it." Lucas hesitated for a moment, then added, "I've heard it said that those who follow the star will find something they've lost. Or something they've been searching for. But the path is not an easy one. It will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Eliza's heart raced. Do you think the star will lead me to something? Lucas gave a slow, knowing smile. I think the star will lead you to something you are meant to find, Eliza. But only if you're brave enough to follow it. Her grandfather gave a soft chuckle. Ah, Lucas. You always know how to give good advice. But Eliza's mind was already racing. The star, the gift, the journey. There was no doubt in her heart now. She knew what she had to do. That night, as the snow continued to fall gently outside, Eliza lay in her bed, staring up at the ceiling. Her thoughts were filled with the possibilities of the mysterious star. What would it bring? And was she truly brave enough to follow it? As sleep slowly crept over her, she whispered to herself, I will follow the star. I will find its gift. And so, with the first light of Christmas morning, Eliza's adventure was about to begin. Chapter 2, The Dreamer's Journey. The morning after the star appeared, Eliza awoke with a start. She had barely slept, her mind alive with thoughts of the brilliant light she had seen the night before. Her grandfather had spoken of the star's power and mystery, but Eliza had felt something else, a pull, a beckoning, as though the star had chosen her for something important. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft crackling of the fire in the hearth and the faint sound of birds chirping outside. The house was quiet, as it always was at this time of day. But Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that today was not just another winter morning, it was the beginning of something. She jumped out of bed and hurried to the window, her breath fogging up the glass as she peered out. The star was gone now, hidden behind a veil of clouds, but the memory of its light still shimmered in her heart. Her eyes narrowed with resolve. She had made up her mind. She was going to find the star, and the gift it promised. Eliza's grandfather was already up, sitting at the table with a cup of tea. His silver hair gleamed in the morning light, and he looked up from his mug with a knowing smile when she entered the room. "You've made your decision, haven't you?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. Eliza nodded, her heart racing. "Yes, grandfather. I'm going to follow the star. I have to find its gift." Her grandfather's smile widened, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I thought you might," he said. "I've seen that look in your eyes before, the look of a dreamer, determined to find what others cannot. You have always been a curious soul, Eliza. But remember, this journey is not an easy one. The star's gift is not meant for everyone, and it will not reveal itself lightly." "I don't care," Eliza replied, her voice steady. "I have to try. I feel like I've been waiting for this my whole life." Her grandfather studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well, my dear. Just promise me this, that you will not lose yourself along the way. The star may show you wonders, but it can also lead you into darkness if you are not careful." Eliza smiled reassuringly. "I'll be careful, I promise." Her grandfather nodded, though his eyes remained troubled. "Then go with my blessing. But remember, the journey is long, and the path is not always clear." With that, Eliza kissed him on the cheek and grabbed her coat, slipping out the door before he could say anything more. The morning air was crisp, biting at her cheeks, but Eliza didn't mind. She felt a surge of energy inside her, a sense of purpose that had never been there before. The village was still waking up. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional sound of someone shoveling snow or a dog barking in the distance. Eliza took a deep breath, feeling the fresh, cold air fill her lungs. The journey ahead would be long, but she was ready. She walked quickly, heading toward the edge of the forest where the stars had been visible the night before. As she approached the tree line, a voice called out to her from behind. "Eliza, wait." She turned to see Lucas, the blacksmith's son, hurrying toward her. His thick, dark hair was hidden beneath a woolen cap, and his broad shoulders were hunched against the cold. Despite his strong build, there was a gentleness in his eyes that always made Eliza feel at ease. "I heard you were leaving," Lucas said, breathless. "I thought I'd come to see you off." Eliza smiled at him, feeling a mix of warmth and something else, something she couldn't quite explain. Lucas had always been a good friend to her, and though she had often wondered about the strange connection they shared, she had never let it distract her. "You're not trying to stop me, are you?" she teased. Lucas shook his head. "Of course not. I don't want you to go alone. The forest can be dangerous this time of year. I'll go with you, if you'll have me." Eliza hesitated for a moment. She had always been independent, preferring to do things on her own, but there was something reassuring about having Lucas by her side. He had always been steady and kind, someone she could trust. "I'd like that," she said finally. It's a long journey. And who knows what we'll find along the way. Together, they turned toward the forest. The path ahead was winding and uncertain, the trees thick and dark. Snow had begun to fall once more, dusting the ground with a layer of white, and the air felt thick with the promise of something unknown. As they walked, Lucas fell into step beside Eliza, his presence comforting in the silence between them. The journey ahead felt less daunting with him there, though Eliza still felt the weight of what lay before her. She didn't know what the star's gift would be, but she knew one thing for certain: it was something she had to discover for herself. They walked for hours, the forest growing denser as they moved further from the village. The trees seemed to close in around them, their bare branches twisting and reaching like fingers in the pale light. Despite the cold, Eliza felt a warmth building within her, a sense of excitement that made her heart race. "Do you think the star will still be there?" she asked, glancing up at Lucas. "I don't know," he replied. "But stars don't just vanish. If it's meant to be, you'll find it." Eliza nodded, though doubt lingered in the back of her mind. The further they walked, the more uncertain the path became. The snow had deepened, and the ground was slick with ice. She felt her feet slip once or twice, but Lucas was there to steady her, his hand warm and strong on her arm. Hours passed, and still there was no sign of the star. The forest seemed endless, its silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps crunching in the snow. Eliza began to wonder if she had made a mistake. Perhaps the star had been a trick of the light, a figment of her imagination. Perhaps the gift it promised wasn't meant for her after all. But just as doubt began to creep into her thoughts, a strange feeling washed over her. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Eliza stopped in her tracks, looking around. Lucas glanced at her. "What is it?" "I don't know," she murmured, feeling a strange pull, as if the forest were guiding her towards something. "I think we're close." Ahead, through the trees, Eliza saw a faint glow. It was dim at first, but as they approached, it grew brighter, warmer. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding with anticipation. The glow grew stronger, and soon, she could see it clearly, a single, brilliant star shining in the distance, as if suspended between the trees. Eliza gasped, her breath catching in her throat. The star. It was real. And it was waiting for her. Chapter 3, The Gift of Courage. The star gleamed like a beacon, its light so vivid that it seemed to pulse with life, drawing Eliza and Lucas deeper into the forest. The soft crunch of their footsteps in the snow seemed distant, as though the world around them had faded into silence. Eliza's heart raced as they moved toward the light, her breath visible in the cold air. Every step brought her closer to something she couldn't quite understand, yet something she knew she had to reach. Lucas glanced at her, his brow furrowed with concern. "Are you sure we should go closer? This doesn't feel right." Eliza didn't answer right away. She simply moved forward, drawn to the light in a way that felt beyond her control, as though some invisible force was guiding her. Lucas, after a long moment, followed her, though his steps were slower, more cautious. The star was no longer just a distant glimmer. Now it stood before them, its source hidden behind a veil of mist and shadows. The light flickered, its warm glow contrasting sharply with the cold air surrounding them. It was beautiful, but strange. Eliza could feel a heavy weight in the air, a sense that this place was not ordinary. As they stepped closer, the mist seemed to part, revealing a small clearing in the heart of the forest. In the center stood a figure, cloaked in shadows, though the soft glow of the star illuminated just enough to reveal a tall, slender silhouette. The figure was still, unmoving, but Eliza felt its gaze settle on her. "You have come," a voice echoed, soft but clear, as if carried on the wind itself. Eliza froze, her heart thumping in her chest. Lucas stepped closer, his expression wary. "Who are you?" The figure did not respond to Lucas, but instead turned its head slowly toward Eliza. "You are the one the star has chosen." Eliza swallowed hard, feeling both a rush of excitement and a knot of fear form in her stomach. "I don't understand. The star. It led me here. I thought it would show me a gift." The figure seemed to consider her words before it spoke again, its voice softer now, almost comforting. "The star's gift is not one of riches or fame. It is not a thing that can be held or touched. It is something that must be earned, something that lies within." Lucas took a step forward, but the figure's gaze shifted toward him, and he froze, an invisible weight pressing down on him. "You cannot walk this path with her," the figure said, its voice carrying an authority that made Lucas hesitate. "The journey she must take is hers alone." Lucas looked at Eliza, concern etched on his face. "Are you sure, Eliza? This feels wrong." I can't just let you go on your own." Eliza hesitated. She had always prided herself on her independence, but this felt different. She could sense that the journey ahead was something only she could face. The star had brought her here, not to stand in the safety of the village, but to venture into the unknown. "I have to go," she said, her voice steady, though the doubt lingered deep inside her. Lucas gave her a long look, then nodded, though reluctantly. "I'll wait for you. Just promise me you'll be careful." Eliza didn't respond immediately. She turned back to the figure, whose eyes now glowed faintly in the darkness. "What is this gift? How do I earn it?" The figure's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Courage, child. The gift is courage. The ability to face what lies ahead, even when the path is uncertain. The strength to continue when fear tries to stop you." Fear gripped Eliza's heart at the words, but she refused to let it show. She had made it this far, and she wasn't going to stop now. Not when she was so close to something she couldn't even begin to understand. The figure's voice grew distant, almost fading into the wind. "The journey is not just one of distance, but of heart. There are trials ahead, and the true gift lies in how you meet them." And then, without another word, the figure vanished into the mist, leaving Eliza standing alone in the clearing, the star's glow still bright and steady above her. She looked back at Lucas, who was still standing at the edge of the forest. He had not moved, his eyes locked on her with a mix of worry and affection. Eliza gave him a small smile, then turned toward the path that lay ahead, the faint glow of the star guiding her forward. "I'll be back," she whispered to herself. "I will find the gift." As she stepped away from the clearing, the air grew colder, the wind biting at her skin. The forest seemed to close in around her, the trees casting long, eerie shadows across the snow-covered ground. Eliza pressed on, her breath coming in short bursts as she walked deeper into the forest. The path was winding, the trail unclear, but she did not hesitate. She knew that the further she went, the more she would be tested. And as she walked, she began to realize that this journey was not just about finding the star's gift, it was about discovering what lay within her heart, and whether she had the courage to face it. The forest stretched on, its silence broken only by the whispering wind. Eliza's thoughts drifted back to her grandfather's words. He had warned her that the journey would not be easy, that the gift of the star could be as much a curse as a blessing. But even in the face of the unknown, Eliza felt something stirring inside her, a quiet determination that pushed her forward, step by step. She was ready for whatever lay ahead. The trees seemed to grow taller as Eliza walked, their branches twisting into strange shapes. The forest felt alive, but not in a way that comforted her. There was an uncanny stillness to it, as though time itself had slowed down. Her footsteps echoed louder now, and the further she walked, the more she felt the weight of the forest pressing down on her. Suddenly, she stopped. Up ahead, a figure stood motionless at the edge of the path. The mist swirled around it, obscuring its features, but Eliza felt a sharp chill run down her spine. It was another shadow in the mist, standing at the edge of her path. She didn't move. The figure remained still, its presence heavy in the air. Eliza took a step forward, then another, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what this figure represented or what it wanted, but she couldn't turn back now. She had come too far. With a deep breath, Eliza raised her head high and stepped forward. Chapter 4, The Trial of Shadows. The figure in the mist stood motionless, its presence unsettling, yet Eliza felt an odd sense of calm wash over her as she took her next step forward. The air around her seemed to hold its breath, and the silence of the forest deepened. It was as if the world itself had paused, waiting for her to make a move. Eliza stopped just a few paces away from the shadowed figure, squinting to make out its features. The mist was thick around it, swirling like a living thing, but the figure was clear, tall and slender, cloaked in darkness. Its face, hidden beneath the hood, was shrouded, but Eliza could feel its eyes upon her, though no gaze met hers. "Why do you come?" The figure's voice echoed, deep and cold, yet strangely soothing, as if it came from far away. "What do you seek in the heart of the forest?" Eliza swallowed, her pulse quickening. The voice was so unlike anything she had heard before. It was not like the soft, comforting words of her grandfather, nor the warm kindness of Lucas. This voice carried with it a weight, an ancient presence that seemed to reach deep into her soul. "I seek the gift of the star," she said, her voice trembling only slightly. "I was chosen to find it." The figure did not move or respond immediately. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees and the crunch of snow beneath her boots. "Many come," the figure finally spoke, its tone shifting, darker now, like a warning. Many seek the gift of the star, but few are chosen to truly receive it. What makes you different, child? What do you think you are worthy of? Eliza's heart skipped a beat. The question was more than just words, it was a challenge, one that she could feel in her very bones. This was not a simple test of strength or knowledge. It was a test of something far deeper, something buried within her. She thought back to her grandfather's warning about the journey, about the trials that lay ahead. She remembered his words about the star's gift being something that must be earned, something that would challenge her in ways she could not predict. "I am here," she said, her voice more certain now, "because I believe there is something inside of me that is meant to be awakened. I don't know what it is, but I know I can't turn back. I have to find it." The figure seemed to consider her words for a long time. The mist shifted again, swirling in the air as if it were alive. Then, with a sudden motion, the figure stepped forward into the path, blocking her way. "Then you must prove your worth," it said, its voice now a low, almost hypnotic whisper. "The path you seek will not be given easily. To claim the gift, you must first face your fear. Only then can you earn the courage you seek." Before Eliza could respond, the figure's hands rose slowly, and the air around her began to shift. Shadows seemed to emerge from the trees, twisting and curling like dark tendrils reaching toward her. The forest, once still, now felt alive in an unsettling way, as if it were holding its breath, watching her every move. Suddenly, the shadows stretched toward Eliza, closing in from all sides, creeping up the trees, curling around the snow-covered ground. They moved like living things, dark and cold, and Eliza instinctively took a step back, her heart racing in her chest. "This is the trial of shadows," the figure said, its voice now distant, as though it were speaking from within the very shadows themselves. "You will face your deepest fear. Only by confronting it will you earn the courage to continue." The shadows began to form into shapes, figures, distorted and shifting, like fragments of her worst nightmares. Eliza's breath caught in her throat as she saw them take form, a dark figure, cloaked and faceless, standing tall before her, a shadowy beast, its glowing eyes locked onto hers, and other shapes, blurry and indistinct, yet somehow all too real. Her pulse quickened. Her fear swelled like a tide, threatening to overwhelm her. "Eliza!" The voice, soft and familiar, called her name from within the shadows. Her heart froze. "Grandfather?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is that you?" The shadowed figure before her shifted, its form suddenly taking on the appearance of her grandfather. But it was wrong. His face was hollow, his eyes vacant and empty. His mouth moved, but the words that came from his lips were distorted, twisted, like something unnatural. "Eliza! Why did you leave me?" The figure's voice called, hollow and sorrowful. "You were meant to stay, to care for me. You abandoned me." Eliza's hands trembled at her sides. The guilt, the doubt, the fear that had always been buried deep within her, everything she had ever questioned about herself, began to rise to the surface. She had always felt that she wasn't enough for her grandfather, that she hadn't done enough to make him proud, to take care of him after his health began to fail. And now, in the dark, the guilt and shame she had tried to bury were staring her in the face. "Stop," she shouted, her voice breaking. "This isn't real. You're not real." But the figure only smiled, an empty, sorrowful grin that made her stomach twist. "Face it, Eliza," the figure whispered. "You are afraid of being alone. You are afraid of losing everything, of not being enough." The shadows around her swirled tighter, pressing in on her, suffocating her. The weight of her fears felt unbearable. She could hear her own breath growing shallow, her heart thumping painfully in her chest. Her legs felt weak beneath her, and for a moment, she wanted to collapse, to give in to the darkness that threatened to consume her. But then, something inside her shifted. No. She couldn't let fear control her. She had come this far, and she had made a promise to herself. The star's gift was not something she would find by running from her fears. She had to face them head-on. "Enough," Eliza cried, her voice firm despite the tremor that ran through her. She took a step forward, then another, her resolve hardening like steel. "I am not afraid. I will not let you control me." The shadows recoiled, as if pushed back by her defiance. The figure of her grandfather flickered and began to fade, his hollow eyes staring at her one last time before vanishing into the mist. "Eliza," the voice whispered, softer now. "You are not alone." And with that, the shadows disappeared entirely. The forest was still once more, the mist dissipating, leaving only the pale light of the star above. Eliza stood, breathing heavily, her heart racing, but a sense of peace washed over her. She had faced her fear, her own self-doubt, and she had not backed down. The figure in the mist reappeared, its form standing before her once again. "You have proven yourself," it said, its voice softer now, no longer cold or distant. "You have faced the trial of shadows and emerged with courage in your heart." Eliza nodded, her breath steadying. She felt different now, stronger, lighter, as though the weight of her fears had been lifted. "Your journey is far from over," the figure continued. "But now, you have the strength to walk it. The star's gift is yours to claim." And with that, the figure faded into the mist, leaving Eliza standing alone in the clearing once more, the light of the star still shining brightly overhead. She had passed the trial. But she knew that the path ahead would hold even more challenges, more fears to face. But for the first time, Eliza felt ready. She would find the gift of the star, whatever it was, and she would walk the path with courage, no matter what lay ahead. Chapter 5, The Heart of the Mountain. The night had deepened as Eliza pressed on, the pale light of the star guiding her through the forest's tangled pathways. The mist from the trial of shadows had lifted, but the cold remained sharp, cutting through her clothes and biting at her skin. Despite the chill, a warmth had spread within her, a quiet certainty that she could face whatever lay ahead. The forest had begun to change as she walked deeper, the trees more sparse, the air thinner. The path was steep now, winding upwards toward the base of a mountain that loomed in the distance. The star's light had grown brighter, more intense, as if urging her forward, toward the heart of the mountain. She had always heard stories of the ancient mountains that lay beyond the village, stories of great treasures hidden deep within the earth, of beings and creatures that were older than time itself. But nothing had prepared her for the sight before her now. The mountain's base was not like the jagged cliffs she had imagined, but rather an enormous opening, a dark cave set into the rock. A low, almost imperceptible hum seemed to come from within, vibrating through the earth beneath her feet. Eliza hesitated at the mouth of the cave, the darkness inside feeling almost alive, as if it were calling to her. Her breath quickened as she took a step closer, and then another. Her feet crunched on the frozen ground, the snow thick beneath her boots. She could hear the faint rustle of wind, but there were no other sounds, no animals, no rustling leaves. The forest was still, the only movement coming from her own body. She stopped at the entrance to the cave, her heart pounding in her chest. The star's light shone brighter here, as if it were coming from within the mountain itself, lighting the path forward. "You've come far," a voice echoed from the cave, sending a shiver down her spine. Eliza spun around, her eyes scanning the darkness. But there was nothing there, only the steady hum that resonated from deep inside the mountain. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice echoing off the rock walls. The voice spoke again, this time closer, almost as though it was right behind her. "The star's gift lies within, but the path is not one for the faint of heart. Only the purest of heart can find what you seek." Eliza's mind raced. The words sounded familiar, like a warning, but there was no time to dwell on them now. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. She stepped into the darkness, her body tense, her every sense alert to whatever lay hidden in the shadows. The air inside the cave was heavy, cool, and still. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, as though the mountain itself was alive, watching her, waiting for her to move. With each step, the hum grew louder, reverberating in her chest, filling her with a strange sensation of both dread and awe. As she ventured deeper, the cave walls began to shimmer faintly, glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The light was not from the star above but from the rocks themselves, embedded with crystals that reflected the light in every direction. The deeper she went, the more the crystals seemed to glow, casting strange, flickering shadows along the cave's walls. And then, ahead of her, she saw it, a glow brighter than all the others. It was a small, flickering light, much like the star that had guided her, but this one was different. It pulsed, rhythmic, like a heartbeat, drawing her toward it. As Eliza moved closer, the air around her thickened, becoming heavier with each step. Suddenly, a voice spoke, sharp and urgent. "Turn back." Eliza stopped dead in her tracks. The voice was like a whisper, but it carried a weight that made her blood run cold. The mountain seemed to tremble, as though it were reacting to her presence. "Who are you?" Eliza demanded, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. She was close now, so close to the light. The response came, not from the shadows but from the very heart of the mountain. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the light ahead grew brighter. "You are not meant to be here. Turn back before it is too late." But Eliza was undeterred. The voice, though frightening, did not sway her. She had made it this far, and the promise of the star's gift was too close now to ignore. With a deep breath, she pressed forward, determined to see this journey through. As she rounded a bend in the cave, she entered a large, open chamber. The walls were covered in glimmering crystals, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal, carved from stone. Atop it sat a small object, glowing with a soft, pulsating light, the source of the beacon she had been following. Eliza approached it slowly, her hand outstretched. The light from the object illuminated her face, casting strange shadows that danced across the walls. She could feel the pulse of the light, rhythmic and steady, like the beating of a heart, as if it were alive. But as her fingers brushed against the surface of the object, the room seemed to shift. The ground beneath her feet gave way, and Eliza fell, plunging into the darkness below. Eliza awoke with a sharp gasp, her body bruised but intact. The cave was gone. The pedestal, the light, everything had disappeared. She was no longer in the mountain's depths, but rather in a vast, endless void. The air was thick, suffocating, and cold, the only light coming from an unknown source that seemed to float just out of reach. Confused, Eliza stood up, trying to make sense of her surroundings. Her body felt heavy, as though the weight of the world itself was pressing down on her. The air buzzed with an unsettling energy, and as she looked around, she realized she was not alone. Shapes began to materialize in the void, figures, shadows, faces, each one flickering in and out of existence. They moved like wisps of smoke, shifting and changing with every passing moment. Eliza's breath hitched. These were not mere shadows, they were memories, fragments of things she had forgotten, things she had buried deep inside her. One figure moved closer, its face flickering into focus. It was her mother, smiling at her, but the smile was distant, empty, like a mask. "Eliza," the figure whispered, her voice hollow. "Why do you run from us? Why do you leave us behind?" Eliza stepped back, her heart pounding. She knew this memory, this guilt. She had always felt she was not enough for her mother. She had left her behind, left her to fight her battles alone. "No," Eliza whispered, shaking her head. "No, I'm not running. I never wanted to leave." But the memory persisted, its words growing louder, more accusatory. "You never stayed long enough. You always ran when things got hard." The shadows closed in, the figures all speaking at once, their voices a cacophony of accusations. The air seemed to grow thicker, the weight unbearable. And then, she heard a voice, a real voice, cutting through the chaos. "Eliza! Eliza, listen!" It was Lucas's voice. Her heart skipped a beat. "Eliza, you are not alone. You never have been." The shadows began to dissipate, the voices fading as the warm, reassuring sound of Lucas's voice grew clearer. The weight lifted, and the world around her began to take shape once more. The void began to fade, the oppressive darkness lifting as light returned to the space. Eliza blinked, and she found herself back in the cave, standing before the pedestal once again. The object still glowed softly, and the weight of the journey, of the trials she had faced, settled within her. She reached out once more, this time with confidence, knowing that the star's gift was within her reach. With a deep breath, Eliza touched the object. And the cave was filled with light. Chapter 6, The Light Beyond. The light that filled the cave was blinding at first, overwhelming Eliza's senses. She had braced herself for something, anything, but nothing could have prepared her for the brilliance that exploded around her. It wasn't just light, it was warmth, it was life itself, filling the space with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Her body tingled as if every cell had come alive, every nerve alight with an energy she had never known. The moment she touched the glowing object on the pedestal, the cave had transformed. The walls shimmered, now radiating with the same brilliant light as the object. It seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat, like the entire world had come alive in response to her touch. She blinked against the brightness, her eyes adjusting slowly. The air was different here, lighter, almost weightless, and yet it was filled with the softest hum of energy, like the very atmosphere around her was alive. She stood in awe, watching as the light continued to grow, spreading out from the pedestal like tendrils of illumination reaching for every corner of the cave. And then, slowly, the light coalesced. The energy around her condensed, forming a shape. Eliza gasped. Standing before her was a figure, one she knew well, but never thought she would see again. It was her grandmother. "Grandmother?" Eliza whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the cave. The figure smiled gently, the same smile that had once comforted Eliza during her childhood, a smile that held the warmth of 1,000 memories. But this time, the face was radiant, glowing with the same ethereal light that now surrounded them both. "You've come so far, Eliza," the figure said, her voice soft and soothing, like the wind through the trees at dawn. "You have shown great courage, and your heart is pure." Eliza took a step forward, her heart racing. "Grandmother, how are you here? You're not here in body," her grandmother answered, her smile never fading. "But I am here in spirit, and I have watched over you all this time. You have been chosen, Eliza. You are the one who will carry the star's gift." Eliza's breath caught in her throat. The star's gift. She had heard so much about it, but she never understood its true meaning until now. It wasn't a physical object, nor a treasure to be claimed, it was something far greater. "Why me?" Eliza asked, her voice full of wonder. "I'm just me. How could I possibly carry something so important?" Her grandmother's gaze softened, her light growing brighter in the cave as she took a step forward, her presence overwhelming yet comforting. "Because, Eliza," she said, her voice full of warmth, "you have the heart of a seeker. You have always carried a light within you, even when you did not know it. The star's gift is not given lightly. It is a burden and a blessing. It will change you, but it will also guide you." Eliza felt a deep, aching sense of longing fill her heart as she gazed into her grandmother's eyes. The love, the care, the wisdom, everything she had missed since her grandmother's passing flooded through her, filling the emptiness inside her that she had never quite understood. "What is the star's gift, then?" Eliza asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Her grandmother smiled again, the light from her growing even brighter, almost blinding in its intensity. "It is the gift of knowing, the gift of seeing beyond what is visible. It is the gift of understanding not just the world around you, but the world within you. You have been chosen to carry it, Eliza, not because you are perfect, but because you are willing to grow. You are willing to change." The cave seemed to shift again, the light growing more intense. Eliza's body hummed with the energy, as though the power of the star was flowing through her veins, awakening something deep inside her. She felt as if she were being pulled toward something beyond her understanding, but she knew she had to move forward. "Do not fear the change, Eliza," her grandmother's voice echoed around her, soothing her fears. "The star's gift will guide you, just as it has guided those before you. But you must choose to embrace it." The ground beneath her feet trembled, and Eliza looked down, feeling the energy of the mountain itself shifting beneath her. The crystals in the cave walls pulsed in time with the rhythm of her heart, and she felt an overwhelming sense of connection to everything around her, the earth, the light, the very air she breathed. "I'm ready," she said, her voice strong and clear, a newfound sense of purpose rising within her. "I will carry the star's gift." Her grandmother's figure nodded, the light around her now almost blinding in its intensity. "You are ready," she said, her voice full of pride. "But remember, Eliza, this is not an easy path. The star's gift is a beacon, a light in the darkness. But it also draws shadows. It will challenge you. You must hold firm to your heart, to your courage, and trust in yourself." The figure began to fade, its light dimming as it became one with the brilliant glow surrounding Eliza. Before it disappeared completely, Eliza heard her grandmother's voice one last time. "Trust in the light, Eliza. You carry it now." And then, all was silent. Eliza stood alone in the cave, her heart racing as the energy from the star's gift continued to pulse through her. The pedestal before her was now empty, but she could feel its presence. The star's power was no longer just a light in the distance, but a part of her. She could sense it deep within her soul, a connection that transcended the physical world. The cave was quiet now, and yet Eliza felt more alive than ever. The world outside, her village, the people she loved, the challenges that awaited her, felt distant, yet she knew that everything she had been through, every trial and test, had led her to this moment. She was no longer just Eliza. She was the keeper of the star's gift, and that responsibility weighed heavy on her heart, but it also filled her with hope. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. The star's gift was a blessing and a burden. It would not be easy. There would be shadows that followed, trials yet to face, and dangers yet unknown. But she was ready. She would embrace the light, and with it, she would change the world. With a final glance at the pedestal, Eliza turned and began to walk toward the cave's exit. The path ahead was still uncertain, but now, she walked with purpose. The light of the star guided her forward, and she was no longer afraid. Chapter 7, The Awakening Path. As Eliza made her way back through the cave, the light of the star seemed to pulse within her, guiding her every step. The once overwhelming brightness had softened, now a steady glow that filled her soul with both peace and purpose. She could feel the weight of the star's gift within her chest, like a steady beat, like the pulse of life itself. It was not a burden but a calling, a call to awaken, to step into the world with eyes wide open, to embrace what lay beyond the known. The path back through the cave felt different now. The air no longer hummed with an eerie energy but with the quiet reverence of a place that had seen countless seekers before her. The walls, once cold and forbidding, now seemed to welcome her as she passed, the crystals embedded in them shimmering softly as she went. Each step she took, she felt the mountain itself acknowledge her presence, as though the very earth were aware of her journey. Eliza emerged from the cave's entrance, blinking against the sudden brightness of the outside world. The sky had begun to lighten with the first hints of dawn, the horizon painted in shades of pale gold and lavender. The snow-covered forest before her was calm, still, and serene, untouched by the turmoil she had faced within the mountain. But even as the tranquility of the morning washed over her, Eliza felt a stirring deep within her, a reminder that her journey was far from over. The star's gift had opened her eyes, but she knew the true challenge lay ahead. The world beyond the mountain was vast, filled with uncertainties, and she would need every ounce of strength to face it. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. As she looked out across the forest, she felt a sudden shift, like a whisper in the wind, a pull toward something she could not yet see. The path was not clear, but it was unfolding, and she was determined to walk it. The village, the people she had left behind, awaited her. But she knew that she was no longer the same girl who had entered the mountain. She was changed. She had seen things, felt things, that no one could understand, and the star's gift now throned within her, a quiet force that would shape the course of her life. With her heart full of resolve, Eliza turned and made her way back to the village, her pace steady, her mind clear. As she neared the edge of the forest, the familiar sights of her village came into view. The thatched rooftops of the cottages, the smoke curling from chimneys, and the soft sounds of daily life filled the air. But as Eliza approached, she noticed something unsettling, a shift in the atmosphere. The warmth of home that should have greeted her seemed distant, replaced by an unease that she couldn't quite place. The village was quieter than usual. There were fewer people working in the fields, fewer children playing in the snow. The distant sound of voices seemed tense, hurried. She quickened her pace, a sense of urgency rising within her. Something was wrong. Eliza crossed the bridge that led into the heart of the village and saw a small crowd gathered near the town square. Her heart tightened in her chest as she approached, her mind racing with questions. As she drew closer, she could see that several of the village elders were standing in the center, speaking in hushed tones. At the sight of her, their conversation faltered. The faces of the villagers were etched with worry, fear, and confusion. The unease in the air thickened. "Is something wrong?" Eliza asked, her voice cutting through the silence. One of the elders, a woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, looked at Eliza with a mix of relief and apprehension. "Eliza," she said quietly, "you've returned. But there's trouble. There's something happening in the northern woods. A shadow, something unnatural." Eliza's pulse quickened. She had sensed it in the air, the quiet unease that seemed to linger over the village, but she had not expected this. Her mind raced back to the teachings her grandmother had imparted, the warnings about the star's gift drawing shadows, drawing danger. The thought of an unnatural force in the woods sent a chill down her spine. "What exactly is happening?" Eliza asked, her voice firm despite the growing concern inside her. The elder's gaze shifted toward the others, and a few of the villagers spoke up, their voices anxious. "Strange sounds have been heard coming from the woods. The animals have started behaving erratically, fleeing toward the village. People have seen things. Figures in the trees, moving in the shadows. It feels as though the forest itself is alive, but not in the way it should be." Eliza's mind raced. The connection she had felt to the star, to the mountain, to everything that had guided her, now felt like a distant whisper. The gift she carried was still new, still untested. She didn't know how to harness its power completely, but she could feel it stirring inside her, like a beacon, calling her to act. "I'll go," she said, her voice steady. "I'll find out what's causing this." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. "It's dangerous," the elder warned. "No one has dared venture that far into the woods since the shadows began. It's as if something dark is watching over them." "I know," Eliza said, her gaze determined. "But I have to. I must." The elder nodded slowly, her expression grave. "Then be careful, Eliza. The star's gift will guide you, but remember, the shadows will seek to cloud your path. You must trust in your heart, and in the light." Eliza gave a solemn nod. She felt the star's presence stir within her, its warmth rising to meet the growing darkness outside. This was it. The trial she had sensed all along. The mountain had prepared her for this moment, and now the world beyond it awaited. Turning toward the northern woods, Eliza took a deep breath and began walking, the village fading behind her as she ventured into the unknown. The shadows in the woods were calling to her, but this time, she would not be afraid. The star's gift was with her, and it was time to confront whatever lay ahead. The journey into the northern woods was long and silent, the weight of the task ahead pressing down on Eliza with every step. The trees here were taller, older, their twisted roots and branches forming a canopy so dense that the light of day barely touched the ground. The air grew colder as she entered deeper into the forest, and the once familiar sounds of birds and rustling leaves gave way to an unsettling stillness. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest, and her breath came in shallow bursts. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, winding and narrow. She kept her senses sharp, her hand hovering near the pouch at her belt where she kept the remnants of her grandmother's teachings, her guidance, the light of the star's gift. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now. The shadows seemed to shift and move around her, following her every step. The trees groaned as if shifting in response to her presence, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Then, ahead of her, she saw it. A figure, standing still and silent between two ancient oak trees, watching her with piercing eyes. It was a man, but not like any man Eliza had ever seen before. His skin was ashen, his features sharp, his eyes glowing faintly with an eerie light. He stood motionless, his hands clasped in front of him, as though waiting for her to approach. Eliza felt a sudden, intense coldness wash over her. This was no ordinary figure. This was one of the shadows the villagers had spoken of, and Eliza knew that her journey had just begun. Chapter 8, The Shadow's Challenge. Eliza's breath caught in her throat as she stood at the edge of the clearing, the figure before her like a shadow made flesh. The air around him felt heavier, colder, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. The man, if he could be called that, stood motionless, his glowing eyes fixed on her with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through her. Her heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears as she gripped the pouch at her side. The star's gift thrummed quietly within her, a pulse of warmth against the chill of the shadows surrounding her. She had been warned about the dangers of the gift, about the shadows that would seek to cloud her path, but facing them was something entirely different. They were no longer distant warnings, they were standing before her, manifesting in ways she hadn't yet understood. The figure took a slow step forward, his presence overwhelming. "So, you've come," he said, his voice low and smooth, like the rustling of dry leaves. "The star's chosen one. The bearer of the gift. How very predictable." Eliza stood tall, despite the fear that threatened to creep up her spine. She had faced danger before, but this was something new. The air crackled with an almost palpable energy, the shadows in the trees shifting in response to the figure's presence. The forest itself seemed to lean in closer, as though watching, waiting for what would happen next. "I've come to stop whatever you are doing here," Eliza said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I won't let you hurt my people." The figure laughed softly, the sound like the wind howling through a hollowed tree. "Hurt them? Oh, no. I'm not here to harm them, child. I'm here to test you." A sudden chill ran down Eliza's spine. Test her? She had no idea what he meant, but she wasn't about to back down. She could feel the light of the star within her, flickering brighter as the tension between them thickened. She reached deep within herself, drawing strength from the gift she carried, but she also knew she needed to be careful. This figure was no ordinary foe, and his words carried a weight that unsettled her. "You are the chosen one, Eliza," the figure continued, his eyes gleaming with a dark amusement. "But the star's gift is not a simple blessing. It is a challenge, a burden that will change you, yes, but not without sacrifice. You think you are ready, but can you face what it asks of you?" Eliza clenched her fists, feeling the warmth of the star surging inside her. "I will face whatever comes. I won't let fear control me." The figure tilted his head, his smile widening. "Fear? Oh, child, you misunderstand. This is not about fear. It's about understanding. The star's gift gives you power, yes, but power alone is nothing. Without wisdom, without control, power becomes a danger, a shadow in itself." Eliza's heart beat faster as his words sank in. He was right, in a way. The gift she carried was still new to her, still mysterious. She had not yet fully understood it, had not fully learned to harness its potential. It was a light within her, yes, but if she wasn't careful, It could become a force beyond her control. "You think you know the light," the figure whispered, his voice now echoing around the clearing. "But do you know the shadows? Do you understand what they are? They are not your enemy, Eliza. They are a part of you. A part of everyone. They are not to be fought, but to be embraced. Only then can you truly wield the star's gift." A shiver ran down Eliza's spine, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of his words. Embrace the shadows? What did he mean? The star's gift was meant to bring light, wasn't it? How could she possibly embrace the darkness? The figure seemed to sense her confusion. "The shadow you fear is the shadow you carry inside you. The light and dark are intertwined, and only by understanding both can you fully awaken the gift you possess." He raised his hand, and the air around Eliza grew colder still. The trees around her began to shift, their trunks twisting and groaning as though alive. The shadows deepened, stretching out like fingers reaching for her. Her heart quickened, and she could feel the light of the star within her pulse faster, as if it too sensed the growing danger. "Fight me, Eliza," the figure continued. "Come, show me your strength. Show me if you are truly worthy of the star's gift." Without warning, the shadows surged forward, wrapping around Eliza's legs, pulling at her like tendrils of darkness. She stumbled backward, struggling to break free, but the shadows were relentless, wrapping tighter with every movement. The light within her flared in response, the warmth of the star's energy pushing against the cold grip of the shadows. "Do you feel it?" The figure's voice came, cold and mocking. "Do you feel the darkness pulling you? You cannot outrun it. You cannot escape it." Eliza's breath came in ragged gasps as she struggled, but she knew that fighting against the shadows with only light would not work. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, "The star's gift is both a blessing and a burden. You must learn to balance the light and the dark." The shadows were not her enemy. They were a part of her. She had to learn to accept them. Drawing a deep breath, Eliza closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. The star's gift pulsed within her, its light steady and constant. She felt its warmth, but she also felt the coldness of the shadows, the pull of the darkness. She wasn't just fighting against them, she had to understand them, embrace them as part of herself. Slowly, she began to relax, allowing the shadows to move around her. The pull on her body eased as she stopped resisting. Instead, she focused on the light inside her, letting it flow out. But this time, she didn't try to push the darkness away. She let it merge with the light, letting both coexist within her. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the shadows around her began to recede, retreating back into the trees. The figure in front of her watched silently, his eyes narrowing as if gauging her every move. Eliza opened her eyes, and the clearing before her seemed different now. The shadows were still there, but they no longer felt threatening. They were simply a part of the landscape, just as much a part of the forest as the trees and the earth beneath her feet. The figure took a step back, his form starting to fade into the trees. "Interesting," he murmured, his voice soft but filled with approval. "You have learned something most never do. The star's gift is not about fighting the darkness, Eliza. It's about understanding that it is within you, and that is what makes the light so powerful." Eliza took a steadying breath, her heart still racing but no longer filled with fear. She had passed the test. She had embraced the balance of light and dark, and the star's gift had shown her the way. "You are ready now," the figure said, his voice a mere whisper in the wind. "But remember, Eliza, the real challenge is yet to come. The shadows may retreat for now, but they will always return. It is how you face them that will define you." With that, the figure disappeared completely, leaving Eliza standing alone in the clearing, the darkness of the woods now quiet around her. The light of the star within her remained steady, a beacon of hope, and now, a deeper understanding. Chapter 9, The Return of the Shadows. Eliza stood in the clearing, her mind a storm of thoughts, her body still vibrating with the intensity of what had just transpired. The figure, whatever he had truly been, had vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving only the echoes of his words behind. But the lesson she had learned, the understanding that had dawned on her in that moment, was far from fleeting. The star's gift was not just a source of light, but a force that demanded balance, patience, and a deeper connection to herself and the world around her. She could feel it now, pulsing gently within her chest, steady and calm. The shadows were still there, lingering at the edges of her vision. The trees stood tall, their limbs heavy with snow, the wind quiet. There was a new tension in the air, though, an undercurrent of something darker, something moving just beyond her reach. Eliza took a deep breath, gathering herself. She had learned to accept the darkness as part of the light, but the figure's words still haunted her, The shadows may retreat for now, but they will always return. That, she realized, was the truth of the world she was entering. There would be no simple resolution, no easy victory. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the challenge of balancing the light and dark would be constant. With renewed resolve, Eliza turned away from the clearing and made her way deeper into the northern woods. The village was still a distant memory, a place behind her that was, for the moment, safe from the shadow's reach. But she could feel the pull of something larger now, a calling that transcended her immediate surroundings. She had come here for a reason, and the purpose of the star's gift was becoming clearer with each passing moment. The forest around her grew denser as she walked, the path narrowing until there were no visible markers to guide her. The trees had closed in, their towering trunks creating a sense of confinement, like walls pressing inward. The deeper she ventured, the more the air seemed to thicken, heavy with the weight of old secrets, as if the forest had not been fully explored in generations. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted. The earth trembled ever so slightly, and Eliza stopped, instinctively reaching out to steady herself against a nearby tree. The sensation of something massive moving deep beneath the ground sent a ripple of unease through her. The shadows were not gone, not by a long shot. In the distance, there was a faint glow, a flickering light, almost like a fire, but it was too still, too unnatural. Eliza felt drawn to it, but also cautious. She knew that her journey had led her to this moment, but what awaited her now? What had been awakened by her passage into the northern woods? The figure had spoken of the shadows, but had he meant something more than just the trees and the dark forces lurking in the distance? Was the true darkness something far greater than she could imagine? She approached the glow, her steps deliberate, her breath shallow. The trees parted to reveal a clearing, and in the center of it was a sight that took her breath away. A massive stone circle stood in the middle of the glade, ancient and weathered, the stones towering like sentinels. At the heart of the circle, a fire burned, though it was not a fire of wood or flame. Instead, the fire was made of pure light, a swirling vortex of energy that pulsed with a rhythm Eliza could feel deep within her bones. The star's gift within her responded to the sight, the warmth inside her chest growing stronger, but also feeling slightly overwhelmed by the intensity of the power before her. The stones around the circle hummed with energy, their surfaces etched with symbols Eliza could not immediately understand. The light at the center of the circle flickered and shifted, its patterns almost alive. She instinctively knew that this was no ordinary place. This was something ancient, something tied to the very heart of the forest, and to the mystery of the shadows she had encountered. Before she could approach any closer, a voice broke through the silence. "You've come." The voice was not from any single direction but seemed to emanate from the stones themselves, resonating in the air around her. Eliza's gaze darted around, trying to locate the source of the voice. But the stone circle was empty, at least, there was no visible person standing there. "Who are you?" Eliza called out, her voice strong, though her heart pounded in her chest. She was no longer sure if the shadows were the only threat she faced. The world she had stepped into was much larger than she had anticipated. The voice answered, but this time, it was not just a single voice. It was as though a multitude of voices echoed together, speaking with one unified tone, ancient and full of wisdom. "We are the keepers of the balance," the voices said in unison. "We have watched over this land for millennia. We have guarded the secret of the star's gift." Eliza took a hesitant step forward, her mind racing. "The star's gift? You knew of it?" "Yes," the voices replied. "We have seen it come and go. Many have borne the gift before you. Few have understood it fully. Fewer still have survived its trials." Eliza's stomach tightened. What did they mean by that? She had only just begun to understand the true nature of the gift, but the weight of their words made her feel small, insignificant, as if the path ahead might be more dangerous than she could imagine. "What do you want from me?" Eliza asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety creeping up her spine. "I don't understand. I thought I was meant to stop the shadows. To protect my village." The voices were silent for a long moment before they spoke again. "You cannot stop the shadows, Eliza. You can only understand them. The balance of light and dark is eternal. The star's gift is not a weapon, but a key. It is a key to understanding the world's true nature. And only by embracing both light and dark can you protect what you hold dear." Eliza felt the weight of their words settle over her. The path she had chosen was not one of simple good versus evil. There was no clear enemy, no singular force to defeat. The true battle was within herself. To wield the star's gift, she would have to come to terms with her own darkness, her own fears, regrets, and doubts, and learn how to find peace with them. "You must make your choice," The voices continued, their tone softer now. "You are the key, Eliza. The shadows will return, but they will not defeat you unless you allow them to. Remember, balance, not power, is the true strength of the star's gift." The light at the center of the circle pulsed more intensely, as if reacting to the gravity of the moment. Eliza stood at the crossroads of her journey, her mind racing with the weight of what she had just learned. The star's gift was not a solution, but a journey, a constant challenge of balancing the forces of light and dark within herself. It would be a battle she would have to face every day. She nodded, taking a step forward, ready to embrace the path that lay ahead. "I will," she said, her voice steady with newfound conviction. "I will learn to balance the light and the dark. I will protect my people, not by fighting the shadows, but by understanding them." The voices seemed to sigh in approval, their presence fading with the light that surrounded her. "You have made the right choice," they whispered. "The journey will not be easy, but you are ready. Go now, Eliza, and face the darkness within and without." The clearing around her fell silent again, the light from the fire growing dim as the shadows of the forest closed in. Eliza stood alone once more, but now, she felt not fear, but clarity. She knew that she had only just begun her journey, but she also knew she was not alone. The star's gift was hers to wield, and with it, she would walk the path of balance, whatever the future held. Chapter 10, The Dawn of a New Path. Eliza awoke the next morning with the weight of the previous night's revelations heavy on her mind. The first light of dawn filtered through the trees, casting soft beams across the forest floor. The world around her was quiet, as though holding its breath, waiting for the next step in the journey that had begun long ago. The fire in the stone circle had dimmed overnight, but the knowledge she had gained from the keepers of the balance still burned brightly within her. The shadows would return. The balance would always be in flux. But she was ready now. She rose from the ground where she had slept, stretching her arms wide to embrace the stillness. The forest seemed different today, no longer a place of fear or uncertainty, but one of understanding. The shadows weren't her enemies, they were part of the world, as much a part of her as the light within her. She had learned to accept both, to embrace the balance. The memory of the figures she had encountered over the past days, whether the mysterious shadow man or the voices of the keepers, echoed in her mind. The world she was about to enter was far more complex than she had ever imagined. She wasn't merely a bearer of the star's gift, she was its steward, tasked with learning, protecting, and ultimately guiding others to understand the balance of light and dark. Her thoughts shifted to her village. To those she had left behind. Her heart stirred with both love and concern. What would she do when she returned? Would they understand the changes in her? Would they accept the truths she had learned? Eliza stood for a long moment, contemplating the weight of those questions. Then, with a steadying breath, she knew her answer. She wasn't just carrying the star's gift for herself. She was carrying it for them, her family, her friends, her village. They would need her to help them understand the balance, too. She couldn't keep the knowledge to herself. She had to share it. With determination settling in her chest, Eliza turned toward the distant path that led home. The journey back would not be easy, but it was the next step in the work she had to do. The star's gift had shown her that it wasn't about conquering darkness or defeating an enemy, it was about learning to walk through life with eyes wide open to both the light and the shadows. The path ahead was long, but Eliza was no longer afraid of what lay before her. She was no longer a girl searching for a way to stop the darkness. She was a woman carrying the light of the star within her, and she understood now that it was her task to walk between worlds, to stand as a bridge between the shadowed unknown and the shining hope of the future. The journey was not over. It had only just begun. As she made her way back through the woods, she could feel the shift in the air. The shadows were still there, lingering just beyond her vision, but they no longer held the same weight of fear. She had come to understand them, not as enemies, but as part of the eternal dance of the world. And in that understanding, she found her strength. Hours passed, and the forest began to thin as she neared the edge, where the trees gave way to the open fields that would lead her home. The village was still some distance off, but the familiar sights, rolling hills, quiet streams, were within reach. Eliza's heart began to race with anticipation. What would she find when she returned? Would they be ready for the lessons she had learned? As she walked toward the village, the light of the star inside her pulsed softly in time with her steps. It was a beacon, a guiding force. And she knew, in her heart, that this was only the beginning of her true purpose. She was no longer just a girl from a small village, she was the bearer of the star's gift, the one who would carry the message of balance and understanding to all who would listen. And as she approached the village, she saw the first signs of life, Figures moving in the distance, the smoke rising from chimneys. A sense of peace settled over her, and for the first time, she understood what it meant to be at peace with both the light and the dark. The star had shown her the way, and now, it was time to share that light with others. She stepped into the village, her feet light, her heart steady. It was time to begin the work she had been chosen to do. This marks the end of the story, with Eliza poised to embark on her true purpose. Thank you for following her journey.